Hi, this is my video note for the discussion 4 post, and I will be explaining the following concepts: 3 positives of inflation, 3 negatives of inflation, and the Big Mac Index. So, 3 positives of inflation could be how it can stimulate economic growth by encouraging consumers to not hold on to money and instead spend it. More spending equates to more economic growth. But in order to be able to match the rising prices, you also have to have a rising wage, which could be another benefit. Wages will rise to kind of coordinate with the rise in prices. Another benefit of inflation could be that it prevents deflation, or when prices go way down and companies have to lay off employees, people start hoarding their money. That's more of an economic disaster than moderate inflation is. 3 negatives of inflation could be that consumers obviously can't buy as much with their money, but if wages don't match the increase in prices, consumers could be misled that they're actually earning more money when in reality they could actually be losing money, because if the wage increase rate doesn't match the inflation rate, you're still losing money even though your wages increased. Another negative of inflation could be that those who are already struggling to make ends meet will struggle more. Low-income households will have greater disparity between, say, middle-class households, and they will struggle even more now that they have to make up that difference of a rising inflation rate when their wages may not increase at the same rate. So people will suffer because of this. And a final negative of inflation could be that businesses will also get hurt. And surprisingly not in the ways that many think. Obviously, costs are going to rise if the inflation rate is rising. But one thing I didn't realize is that there's this thing called menu costs, and then there's also this thing called shoe leather costs. So menu costs are, in simple terms, the cost of changing the price. So in order to change the price, you might have to update your technology, such as the screens that menus are displayed on. You might have to update physical menus. That costs money. Advertising new prices also costs money. That is what a menu cost is. And then shoe leather costs would be costs incurred from wasted resources when people try to change their behavior so they can spend more money. So in order to buy more, you're going to have to maybe use more gas to travel. People basically incur more costs by trying to use more of their money, because if you have to spend more money, you have to find a way to be able to spend more money, like increased credit card charges. There's always a service charge on a credit card. That's a good example. Okay, so the final concept is the Big Mac Index. From what I understood, it was an index that uses the Big Mac as its measurement. So basically, you compare the Big Mac price in a base currency. You could use the US as an example of a base currency. And you compare the price to a foreign currency, like the yen. And then you use that to form a comparison, and that comparison gives you an implied exchange rate. Then you compare that to what the actual exchange rate is, because there's an actual exchange rate. But this shows if the currency is being under or overvalued.